Good morning, seventh graders. If you're viewing this, it is Wednesday, October 14th, and this video will help you complete the second half of your notes page that you can type up and return to me on Google Classroom. This slide is where we left off on Monday. Some students wanted some clearer clarification, so you may want to add to your notes on encomiendas. Reminder, encomienda was like a passport. Now, if you want an official definition, it was a land grant that the king gave you. It was permission by the king for you and your family to come to America. In return, the king asked for two things. He asked for labor, which means he asked you to come over here and work very hard to make a good living for yourself and earn money. And yes, he expected you to use Native American slave labor to get that work done. He did not want the Indians to be a problem for him and his military in Spain to have to deal with. He expected you to keep the Indians in control, and he expected you to deal with any problems that there might arise. Slave labor was very harsh for Native Americans here in places like California, Mexico, South America. It resulted in thousands upon thousands of lives lost during the time period, and the consequences of that perhaps continue in America still today. Let's move on to a little bit better story before we finish everything up for the week. We want to talk about a man that I would say could be considered a hero in this chapter. We've talked about Columbus Day kind of being disrespectful in that Columbus didn't do all the things that sometimes history books claim that he did. And his treatment of Native Americans is kind of an embarrassment to have his name on a calendar. That's an opinion, of course, but it's an opinion more and more shared by many historians. I think a hero that we could honor during the month of October is a Roman Catholic priest like Bartolome de las Casas. And you see the missions statement here as a definition. He came over here to help Native Americans, not to harm them. He established missions across New Spain colonies and did his best to try to reform the encomienda system. He spoke out, he wrote against the slavery that was happening in the New World. This put him at odds with the king and the government officials, but he bravely stood out when everybody else was accepting slavery. He did his best to take a stand to end it. He was a friend to Native Americans, not a villain. But the conclusion of this story is that as the death rates continued to grow among the Native American population, the Spanish did not look to end slavery. They looked to bring other people from parts of the world in, and they began to bring African slaves in to pick up the slack of the dead Indian slaves on the farms and in the mines. This is a horrible recreation of the racial hatred and discrimination that people had left behind in Europe. Sadly, they brought that discrimination, they brought that hatred with them to America. To finish up our lessons for this week, we're looking at basically a result of all these different cultures coming together to live in America for the first time. And you had all these different groups of Spanish and Portuguese, but you also had Native Americans. Now you have Africans that are being brought into the mix as well. And you begin to form a distinct social class in places like Mexico. And we're going to finish this page by looking at the social classes mentioned in our text. At the top would be peninsulares. You want to write that they are people who are natural born citizens of Spain. They were born and raised in Europe. Spain and Portugal are actually a peninsula. Geography kids know that peninsulas are bodies of land surrounded by water on three sides. And so if you identified yourself as a peninsulari, you were letting people know that you were from the peninsula, you were from Spain, and that they should treat you as very special or very important. All the government officials, if you had power, if you had the ability to make laws in Mexico, you were a peninsulare. The second class listed there on your notes sheet were known as Creoles. Now, Creoles, you will write, were born in America. These were at the beginning children of the peninsulares, children of the Spanish families who moved to America. Now, genetically, Creoles are exactly the same type of DNA and blood type as peninsulares. They had two European or Spanish parents. They were wealthy. They inherited the land, perhaps, or the money that their parents had owned. They could become wealthy owners of land, or they could be merchants like storekeepers. But you and I need to understand that what is happening in history is that those that were born in America, no matter how important their family was, are going to be started to be treated like second class citizens. In those people's minds back in this time period of the 1500s, it was better for you to be born in Spain than it was for you to be born in America. You would always be looked down on by a peninsulare. Even worse in Spanish society would be those children who came from mixed parentage. What we mean by that is that one parent was Spanish and that he had a child or maybe even married a Native American woman. And so you were of mixed heritage. You were half Spanish and half Native American. And although you may be one of the hardest workers in your community, there was no way that you would gain the power and money that a peninsulare or even a Creole would enjoy. The mestizos, your book will tell you, were the hardest working people in America at the time. They would probably have nice homes and probably have decent incomes. But no matter how hard they worked, no matter how smart or intelligent they were, they never could advance and be treated as well as those in the other two classes. They were called mestizos. Even today, when you look at population of current Latin American countries, anywhere from 75 to 90% of that country's population probably identify themselves as mestizos today. They look back at their family line and they have European blood, but they, of course, have American blood as well. At the bottom of the chart, and you can write this term if you wish to, is a mulatto. And this would be mixed heritage that involved African. One of your parents would have been an African slave. Think about the social taboo that that would have had in the 1500s. And obviously, your skin perhaps would be darker than the other children. You would, in fact, look different than the other kids on the street. And chances were you were treated horribly for this, knowing that one of your parents were African. In many cases, these children probably would have been abandoned by their father because they wouldn't have wanted the community to know that he had a child with an African woman. This wraps up your notes. We're going to try to get this week finished up. Make sure that you have turned in not only these notes when you're finished typing them on Google Classroom, but it's Wednesday. I should have your lesson 3 assignment turned in as well. You go ahead today. Your assignment is to read lesson 4. We're going to wrap up this chapter 2, and I'll have new assignments up there tomorrow on Thursday. Any questions? Shoot me an email. I'll get back to you. Again, our goal is to start the second quarter off to a great start. No zeros this week. Get your assignments turned in. Don't forget the 2 IXL standards that need to be finished this week as well. Double B, 1 and 2. 7th graders, make me proud. Let's go get to work.